Hello and welcome to this Haas Tip of the Day. Today we're talking all about probing on our Haas mills. We're going to cover our top troubleshooting tips. Now Haas has made probing on their mills really simple, but if something does go wrong, where do we look? Well, one of my favorite quotes is that if you hear hoofbeats, think horse, not zebra. What that means is look at the most common things first. So when we're looking at common root causes of probing problems, bad batteries are right at the top of our list. So how can we tell if we've got a bad battery? Now, if I was at home and digging through the AA batteries in my kitchen junk drawer, I would grab a voltmeter and check and see if the voltage is low. But these batteries that we're using in our probes are nothing like that. They're lithium thionyl chloride batteries. These batteries have a shelf life that's measured in decades, not months, and they wear down in a very unique way. The alkaline batteries that we're all used to wear down over time. If I leave my flashlight on for a couple hours, it might read 1.1 volts instead of 1.5 volts. Now our LTC batteries are not like that. They're going to hold 3.6 volts right up until the moment they die. Now, why is this important? Well, what I'm trying to convey here is that just because you get 3.6 volts on your voltmeter when measuring an LTC battery, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good battery. I know, you don't believe me. You trust your voltmeter. Well, let me show you a pile of batteries and explain how this works. Now, I've placed a bunch of used probe batteries onto this bench. Now, all these are bad. I've had electrical engineering check them under load with equipment that you and I don't have. Now, what you and I do have is a voltmeter. And most of these batteries still read 3.6 volts. Only 3 of them have no voltage on them at all. Let me grab a couple of these batteries, we'll put them into a spindle probe and show you what we get. Now, if I put these batteries in and I get a flashing red light or a flashing red, green, blue light where it cycles that over and over again, that means that these batteries are bad. And it looks like I'm getting a flashing red, green, blue. These batteries that measured 3.6 volts just a minute ago are showing up as bad. Now, if we had been in the machine, actually in cycle, and we got a low battery alarm, it would typically flash green and blue. So you can get all kinds of errors if we put bad batteries into our spindle probe. So if you have any probe problems, any flashing lights, and you're not sure what the problem is, change your battery. And when installing the new battery, be sure to write the date on it. That way you'll know when it was installed. Now, even when the probe isn't being used, it's just in standby mode, it's still using some electricity. Now, Renishaw tells us that our spindle probe lasts around 250 days max. Even when it's not being used, it can only last about 8 months. Now, the table probe, our OTS tool setter, the batteries in there last around 10 months, even if it's not being used. So if you're getting any kind of flashing lights and your probe stops working, change the batteries. Now, when you change your batteries, be sure that you don't trigger that probe. If you hold down the probe while changing the batteries, that could put it in a setup mode, and you could mess up your settings. Now, that's not likely. Remember, think horse, not zebra. Now, if you've changed out the battery and you're still having some kind of probing problem, the next thing we want to look at, the next most common culprit, is going to be our calibration. Now, we've got really good instructions on how to calibrate your probe on the Haas DIY site. So you can check those out at diy.haascnc.com. Just search for probing and look under procedures. Now, some tips and tricks on calibrating your probe. Always do things in order. You want to calibrate the table probe first, then you're going to calibrate the length of your spindle probe, and finally you're going to end with calibrating the diameter on your spindle probe. If you did things out of order or had to reset during this process, we could have messed something up. The machine might think that it's done calibrating when it's not. If that's happened to you and you just can't get through the calibration process, go to the macros page clear your macro variables and start over. That'll refresh the entire system and let us recalibrate from scratch. Now, if we've changed the battery and we've tried to calibrate the probe and we're still having problems, maybe we're getting alarms, or maybe we couldn't even finish the calibration process, it's time to look at our probing macros. It's possible that they've been corrupted or deleted altogether. You can download the probing macros for your machine by going to the DIY site. Again, search for probing and then go to the download section. If you have a wired table probe, you're going to download version 1.9 of those probing macros. If you've got a classic control with a wireless table probe, you're going to download version 3.0. And if you've got a next generation control, an NGC, you're going to download version 3.7 or higher. Now, loading these macros is pretty simple. These are 9,000 programs, so we need to turn setting 23, 9,000 program edit lock, off. Next, we just load these onto the control like you would any other program. On a classic control, you copy them into memory. On their way in, it's going to self-extract into all these 9,000 programs, all of our probing macros. If you've got a next-gen control, those probing macros are going to be placed into the 09000 folder. Well, hopefully we solved your problem. Today's video should have covered about 95% of the root causes of probing issues. We change out the battery. Be sure to write the date on the battery. Then we calibrate our probes. Be sure to clear out the macro variables and calibrate the probe in order. Table probe, spindle probe length, spindle probe diameter. If we still had a problem, we told you that you can download the new macros, probing macros, from the Haas DIY site. Now, if you're still having problems, we've made another video that covers manually checking your probe and also tells you how to set your trigger logic settings on those Renishaw probes. That's it, and thanks for watching this Haas Tip of the Day.